Hello matriculants, let's prepare together for the final exam 2025. Today we'll be tackling mathematics and we'll be solving cubic equations or third-degree polynomials in order for us to be able to sketch cubic functions under calculus. So today we're solving this following equation. In order for us to solve this equation, we must first identify the constant value in this equation, in this case it is what? 4. So the constant value in this equation is 4. And then once we've identified the constant value, we need to determine the factors of the constant value. So that is the factors of 4. So the factors of 4 will be plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2. So we can therefore substitute each of these factors into this equation. And then when we substitute each of these factors here, if we get that it is equal to 0, then that particular factor is a solution. But if it is not equals to 0, then it is not a solution to this equation. So let's first start substituting 1. So I'm going to substitute 1 into this equation and then trying to determine if it is a factor or not. So here you can already see here it's going to be 3 minus 7, which is going to be minus 4 plus 4. This is indeed 0. So this simply tells us that x is equals to 1 is a solution to this equation. And then once we know that x is equals to 1 is the solution to this equation, we're going to say x minus 1 is equals to 0 by transposing this 1 to the other side. Then we therefore know that x minus 1 is a factor. So once we know that this is a factor, we therefore going to say x minus 1. We're going to solve now this cubic equation into two parts. One which is going to be linear and the other one which is going to be quadratic. So the first bracket represents the linear part and the second bracket represents the quadratic part. So in order to get the first term of the second bracket, what you normally do is you just take the first term here, which is 3x cubed, and then divide it by the first term of the first bracket. So what do I mean by that? So I mean you're going to say 3x cubed divided by x, and then the value that we're going to get is 3x squared. So that 3x squared will therefore be the first term of the second bracket, that is the 3x squared. And then in order for us to get the middle term, we don't know it, so we just say it is mx. And then now that we have determined the middle term, in order to determine the last term, we take the constant of the equation, which is 4, and then we divide it by the second term of the first bracket. So what do I mean by that? I mean we're going to say 4 divide 4 by negative 1. So it means the last term of our bracket is going to be negative 4. And then once we have this equation here, we can then multiply the terms in order for us to determine the value of m. So we're going to say x multiplied by 3x squared, that is going to be 3x cubed. And then we're going to say x multiplied by mx, that is going to be mx squared. Then we're going to say x multiplied by negative 4, that is going to be minus 4x. And then we're going to say negative 1 multiplied by 3x, that is going to be negative 3x squared. And then we're going to say negative 1 multiplied by mx, that is going to be minus mx. And then we're going to say negative 1 multiplied by negative 4, that is going to be plus 4. And all of that is going to be equal to 0. And then now that we have all of this, we can therefore group all the like terms together, which I'm going to say 3x cubed plus mx squared minus 3x squared. So I'm just taking that and that term, and then minus 4x, which is this term, grouping it with minus mx plus 4 is equal to 0. And then if we look at this equation here now, this original equation and this equation here, so you can see that the first term and this first term, they are the same. And then you can see this now, the second term now with a square root of 2, with the square of 2, and then the second term here So this term will be equal to that term. And then the third term here, which has a variable x, there is no term, that one it will be 0, so this will be equal to 0. And then this last term here, 4. So we therefore, in order for us to determine m, we can equate this value of minus 7x squared with this value here, mx squared minus 3x squared. So we can therefore say minus 7x squared is equals to mx squared minus 3x squared. And then from there, we can therefore divide by x squared throughout, since we see that the common term is an x squared. So what I did, I took this term and equated to that term here. And then you can see there, these x's, they cancel each other. So we're going to have minus 7 m minus 3. And then from there, we can solve for m. So we can say m is equals to minus 7 transpose straight to the other side, that will be plus 3. So therefore, hence, we're going to have m here, which is minus 7 plus 3. We're going to get that our m is negative 4. So then we've solved for m. Now that we've solved for m, what do we do next? We then take m and substitute it back into our equation there. So in order to do that, we're going to say x minus 1, and then we're going to therefore say 3x squared. Where there is m, we now substitute negative 4. So it's going to be negative 4x minus 4 is equal to 0. So you can now see that we have two parts in our equation. So we have this part that is linear, and then we have this part that is quadratic. So from here in this equation, you can tell that x is equals to 1 is one of the solution of our problem that we are solving here at the top. And then the second part is for us to factorize this quadratic part. So in order to factorize this part, what we do, you're going to say 3 multiplied by negative 4. So you want a term that when you multiply, so you first say take the first term multiplied by the last term. So if you take this first term and you multiply it by the last term, what you're going to get? 3 multiplied by negative 4, you're going to get negative 12. So I'm going to write here negative 12x squared. So that's what you get. So I want values that when I multiply, they will give me a negative 12x squared, but then when they add them, they will give me a negative 4. So what are those values that if I multiply them, I get a negative 12, but then when I add them, I simply get a negative 4. So that will be a negative 6x and a positive 2x. So you can tell that if I say negative 6 multiplied by 2, I will get negative 12x squared. But then if I say negative 6 plus 2x, I get negative 4. So these are the two terms that I need to use. So therefore, from here, this linear part, I can keep it linear like that. And then now I can write here 3x squared. And then this term here in the middle, I can say negative 6x plus 2x minus 4 is equal to 0. And then you can see here, these terms, they represent this 4 in the middle. So here I can say x minus 1. And then here, I can simply just say here now the common term between these two terms is 3x. So therefore, I can take out 3x in this instant. If I take out 3x, this will be x. And then here, it will be just minus 2. And then here, the common term is 2. So if I just say 2, this will therefore be x minus 2. So that is, again, that common term that is equal to 0. And then from here, this is x minus 1. And then from there, you can see that these two terms, they are the same. And then since they are the same, what do we do? We're just going to be saying that we have now 3x plus 2, which is this 3x plus 2. And then we have this x minus 2. And then from here, we would have solved our cubic equation. So it means, therefore, the solution to our problem, therefore, is that x is equals to 1, which is for this term, or 3x is equals to minus 2. That is for the second term here, or x is equals to 2. That is for this third term here. So here we can just divide by 3 on both sides. Then we get that x is equals to minus 2 over 3. So it means that our solutions now to our problem or original problem, which is there at the top there. So the solution to this original problem here, it's x is equals to 1, or x is equals to negative 2 over 3, or x is equals to 2. So here, what I've just did here, you can either solve this very quickly as well and just say a is equals to 3, b is equals to minus 4, and then c is equals to minus 4, and therefore use a quadratic equation. If you're unfamiliar with factorizing in this way, you can just simply use your quadratic equation and get these two x values. X is equals to negative 2 over 3 and x is equals to 2. And then that one is x is equals to 1. Then we would have solved our cubic equation. So why do I emphasize this method of solving cubic equation? This will help you now when you are now required to draw a cubic functions, that is calculus, the graphs in calculus, when you have to solve for the x-intercept. So this is important. So let's meet again. Good night.